Before we begin, I want to take a moment to introduce the expert leading this session. You're about to learn from Amanda Wynalda, an attorney and strategist specializing in asset protection, tax, and estate planning. Amanda brings a rare depth of experience. She has worked within the California Federal Court and the IRS Chief Counsel's Office, giving her firsthand insight into how businesses are structured, protected, and, when done incorrectly, exposed. She earned her law degree from Pepperdine Law and has built her career guiding business owners through the legal and financial decisions that shape long-term stability. What sets Amanda apart is how she teaches. She breaks complex legal structures into clear, practical steps you can follow. Her work is rooted in helping you move forward with certainty, knowing your business is set up properly from the start. She has worked closely with clients across a range of industries, helping them protect what they're building while making informed decisions about taxes, entities, and long-term planning. In this workshop, The Business Side of Being Booked and Paid, Amanda will walk you through how to set up your LLC the right way, so you're not guessing, and you're not leaving yourself exposed. If you're serious about building a business that pays you and protects you, this is where that foundation begins. Let's get into the training.
Of course, thank you everyone for having me. My name is Amanda Wynalda. I'm an attorney at Anderson Advisors. I'm also a third-generation business owner, a second-generation real estate investor. My family started out in my grandfather after World War I with one service truck. And if you called Pete and you were broken down on the side of the road, he'd get you on the road. And so I watched my parents build and my family build a business from one service truck to 11 stores across Southern California. I worked many, many summers out in a hot tire yard until I got smart and started helping my mom with payroll, because then I got some air conditioning. I did not initially think I was going to go into law. I worked in sports television for about a decade. And then when that lifestyle, while it was exciting to go to the Super Bowl or the World Cup and be in these high energy environments, I had my first child and it just wasn't very conducive to being a mom. Those two worlds didn't mix. I met my husband in that industry, and having us both on the road for an event didn't work. So I stayed home. I was stay-at-home mom for 2.5 years. I did the whole make your own baby food, sign language with the baby kind of stuff for about 2.5 years. And then I thought I was going to lose my mind. So I guess I did, because I went to law school. And it was very eye-opening. I'm the kind of person who feels like I need to know everything before I jump into something. And so law school really fit the way that I thought. And interesting enough, I gravitated towards tax law. I tried to do entertainment law, but it was incredibly boring on that end of the spectrum. A lot of just contracts about how many times the X Games were going to be shown in some random country on the other side of the world. And it wasn't exciting at all. But taxes spoke to everyday life. Once we get our first job, have to pay taxes. We all look at that first paycheck and wonder why we work so hard and how there isn't quite as much as we thought there would be. And so I ended up working in a Big Four accounting firm down in downtown Los Angeles. I worked briefly for the IRS Chief Counsel's Office, actually prosecuting people who stole from nonprofits. And then I landed here at Anderson, which is a unique situation because, as many of you are small business owners or starting out, or even have grown and scaled your business, you know that if you've tried to engage with an attorney, it's very expensive, and the knowledge is limited, because as a one-woman show, you eventually need to ask questions that gravitate toward tax, and that attorney tells you, hey, go talk to your CPA. And then you talk to your CPA, and that eventually leads down some legal avenues, and they say, hey, go talk to your lawyer. And you're stuck in between both, not really understanding either language, but expected to translate between the two and make these decisions while also running your business. And so Anderson brings all of that under one roof. We're a group of attorneys as well as tax professionals, and we do a lot of teaching. When I first started here, I thought I was going to be doing estate planning and tax planning, and I end up actually just traveling around the country and teaching tax and asset protection events. And maybe you guys, because you're here, wouldn't be shocked that people want to spend 3 days with tax attorneys to learn about this kind of stuff. But it speaks to my background in the terms that the struggles that I see with students and with clients are the ones that my family went through. And if we can get you guys further down that road so that it doesn't take 3 generations for you to change your family tree. That's really fulfilling for myself personally, and we like to see your guys' success. So without further ado, let me share my screen. And if you just want to give me a quick thumbs up, or if you can see that, okay. Sound is all good. Perfect. I've got the chat up. If you have any questions, I can address questions as we go through. Uh, Also, we're kind of a small group that's here in the Zoom live. So if you want to just ask a question at some point, otherwise we'll go through. This is what we'll be talking about today. I started very basic. Many of you may already know some of the things that we're talking about, but I'm going to give you a lot of meat to what it is. So we're going to start out with what an LLC is, what it actually does, why it gives you liability protection, and how you can either undercut that liability protection by how you're running your business, or you can support it. And then finally, the important things for proper setup. Yay, Sarah, I'm also from Southern California. So fun. We miss that. I'm based out here in Vegas now, so I'm one of the millions of people who have now moved to Vegas. And now I sit in traffic just like I did in SoCal, LA too. All right. So an LLC stands for limited liability company. That's basic. And what that means, LLCs have actually only been around for about 50, 60, almost 70 years. The corporation is really the most historic business structure, and that goes all the way back to 1500s, where people would buy shares in boats that were going across the ocean to get resources, i.e. colonize other places. And so the idea of not having to have such a huge corporate formality is fairly new, but because of how popular the LLC is, there's tons of case law that supports it. Every state has an LLC statute, and courts have been upholding the limited liability of those statutes for years. What the LLC does is it separates you from your business in a legal sense. So instead of doing the same thing you do every day with your I'm Amanda Wynalda hat on, you take that hat off and you put your hat on and say, I'm Natasha, as the CEO of whatever your business is, the Media Collective. And so it separates out your personal finances, your personal legal self that walks around in the world, drives your car, potentially has friends, from your professional self. And in the business world, it'll legitimize your business, right? We want to brand ourselves, and it allows us to do that separate from us as an individual. There's also a lot of flexibility in how we can tax an LLC. An LLC, people often think it's the same as a sole proprietorship. It's not. On the tax side, it is. They're both what we call disregarded entities, meaning that for tax purposes, the IRS, called the John Cena of entities, the IRS doesn't see it, right? As opposed to that, you can also elect to be taxed as an S corporation. If you have more than one owner, you can be a partnership. And you can also elect to be taxed as a C corporation. So that's really where the rubber meets the road in terms of the legal and the tax benefits. Anyone can go set up an LLC fairly easily. There are a lot of considerations to take into account there. And so when does setting up this LLC make sense? Someone's unmuted. And so I heard an echo of my own self. That's always a little disconcerting, right? There are a couple of items listed here. When you're entering contracts, when you start earning consistent income, really, there's no bad time to set it up. The earlier, the better. The earlier you can get that separate bank account, the earlier you can get a business name on your business cards, the earlier you can cut liability off in terms of you doing the same things as an individual and sequestering that into your own business is going to be a good thing. There's no downside, essentially, the point is, to forming an LLC. Oftentimes people will say, well, I just want to get started first. Setting up the LLC is actually a great way to get started and to legitimize yourself from the scenario. And then why are we wanting to do that? you guys are obviously, and if you want to throw up into chat what sort of business you're in, so I have more of an idea and I can customize some scenarios for you. But if you have unhappy clients, we had a client who owned a laundromat, and an individual actually found out where he had lived and came to his house and started throwing quarters at him in his driveway because he turned a white shirt pink or something like that. So you want to really separate that out. You can also, in a lot of you are going to be forward facing in terms of you are your brand, travel advisor, Sarah. You're talking to clients, Meta, hypnotherapy, and empowerment coaching. You're very much a part of your brand. And that's okay. If you are doing any sort of product, we can separate you out so that you are anonymous. And so people don't necessarily need to know that who owns the company unless you're the face of it. If you have a vendor dispute, if you've hired subcontractors and you don't want that liability to attach to you personally, especially if you, let's say, own your own property, any type of lien or lawsuit can attach to your home. We don't want that to happen. We want it to stay in that LLC separate from your individual assets. And then if the ultimate goal is to do this forever because this is your passion, that's great. But if it grows to the size where, hey, you know what, I'm a little bit older, I want to hand this off to either the next generation or to an investor or sell to maybe a private equity situation, having a business entity is going to facilitate that. Your exit strategy, meaning, is something that you should be really thinking about as at the setup stage. Not necessarily have a set plan for that, but without an LLC, it's much, much harder. Without a separate bank account, it's much, much harder to get an outside company or an outside investor to take you seriously. Now, looking at it side by side, like I said, a lot of times people confuse LLC with being a sole proprietor. A sole proprietor just means you're out there in the streets doing your thing. Your income for that still shows up on your Schedule C of your personal 1040, but you have no personal liability protection. It also, it doesn't cost anything. You just go out and you start doing the thing that you're doing. Like Rhonda, if you're a virtual assistant, you just start getting clients. But you don't really get to brand yourself. You can get a DBA, you can file for a DBA. So you can have a business name saying that you as an individual are doing business as under a certain name that you can market under. But having the LLC allows you to do that in a more formalized fashion. And they're very, very inexpensive to get starting. And so what does it mean in terms of getting down to the nitty gritty of your liability protection? It's right there in the name, LLC, limited liability. And you can really think of it, the slide says as a force field. I also like to think of it as a bulletproof vest against lawsuit. And our society is unfortunately very litigious and is getting more and more so. And that LLC is going to separate you from the business, from your actions as a business. It indemnifies you. So that means the same action that you would have done as a sole proprietor that would attach liability to you as an individual, and every other asset you have in your name now attaches to your business LLC instead. Just by the numbers, small businesses are targets. They know that while a larger corporation will have funds to pay out large settlements, they also have funds to pay teams of attorneys to defend themselves, and they don't want to set a precedent where they're simply paying out everyone who files a lawsuit in court. So smaller businesses that appear very successful that may not have those same resources are targets. And so we want to make sure even just one lawsuit that's frivolous, if the average legal cost is $54,000, that's a huge hit to somebody especially who's just starting out or who's putting every dollar they can back into their business to grow it. This was something I saw even with my own family. And a lot of times, especially if you have employees, I remember a scenario where there was a store manager who would start to come in later and later every day. And then pretty soon the cash registers felt a little light. And they went back to the video and he was clearly stealing from the company. And so they fired him. And what do you think he did? He turned around and sued them for something about not getting the required breaks that he was entitled to under California law. And so depending on where you are, California is a little more labor friendly, which we do want that. We want employees to be happy. Or maybe you have felt the opposite and that's why you're out on your own. But in many other states in the country are not as labor friendly. So attorneys are also expensive. I came out of law school, I was billing $450 an hour, and I was a baby lawyer who knew hardly anything. And a lot of that was to simply sit outside of a courtroom and wait for our case to be called. So those things, they add up more and more. And there's never going to be a lawyer that you're paying by the hour who cares as much about your business in every tiny detail as you do. And even if they did, the cost of them to do that, they bill in 6-minute increments. Every time they send an email, every time they file a brief, that's going to cost you more and more money. So we want to avoid that altogether. If someone sees that you are simply just you, then they can do a quick search on Google even and see where you live, what other things you have, and see if you are have a target on your back, then they'll go after you. So we want to sequester that from your personal stuff. And how we do that is through what's called the corporate veil. And it sounds very flimsy, a veil, right? But it really is that bulletproof vest. It creates this barrier between what you do as an individual and what you do as an employee or as the owner of the business. There are certain ways that, unfortunately, courts have found to pierce the corporate veil. So the first initial step would be setting up the LLC to kind of show the world at large that you're serious. An LLC is not going to be as easy of a target as you as an individual. But if a lawsuit were to ever attach to your company, and there's essentially no assets in the company. I mean, think of, you guys are providing services. The company asset is your service. That can't be attached by a lawsuit, right? What's at risk is maybe large cash reserves. We want to keep those in a separate entity outside of our main business. If you have any sort of products, a skincare line, we want to maybe hold patents for those products in a separate LLC so that the LLC that's offering the service or selling the product essentially has no assets, no cash in it. Because if it did, and the court allowed the judgment holder to pierce the corporate veil, they could reach in, take all of that, and then reach out and take what you have in your personal name as well. So maintaining corporate formalities is going to be very important. And it's fairly easy to do if you are an organized person. So you want your separate bank account. Your LLC will have its own tax ID number. It'll have its own operating agreement. You open its own separate bank account. Yes, you are still the signer on that bank account. Your home may still be the formal business address where you get bank statements sent, where you get your credit card sent. That's okay, but you want to pay all of your business expenses out of your business account, and you never ever want to use it for your personal expenses. So it's often helpful if the debit cards are different colors. My husband and I have a partnership where we do some consulting. He was a former soccer player, and so he'll do, especially with the World Cup coming to the United States this summer, he does various appearances. So we have our own partnership LLC for that. Unfortunately, the card is blue, as is our personal debit card. And so being a man, he very frequently gets those mixed up, which leaves a little bit of mess for me to clean up on the bookkeeping side. There are definitely some tears shed at tax time. So just do all of yourselves a favor. If you can, don't get into business with a man. But if you can't help that, then make sure that you are keeping those personal expenses separate from your business expenses. And then if you can't, we always want to document. On the tax side, if you put something on your personal card, you can reimburse yourself. but you're going to need to document that. You're going to need to do an expense report that can be in kind of any format that you want, even a simple spreadsheet. It doesn't have to be the old school expense report ways. And there are a lot of apps out there, even just the QuickBooks app, where you can quickly take snapshots of receipts and save those that way. You also want to formalize everything. I'm a big proponent of put it in writing. I'm going to use my husband as because he does basically all the things wrong. He will say, the deal's done. He'll walk into the room, announce the deal's done. I'm like, okay, well, can I see the contract? I would have loved to have read that before you signed it. He's like, oh, I haven't signed anything yet, but the deal's done. I'm like, as much as interpersonal relationships do move business forward and that you do have to have those skills, the deal isn't done until it's actually in writing. You've put pen to paper. Those are the rules that you and that other person have agreed to play by. So putting things in writing, having that to look back on, people's perceptions of things often change as things go along. So you want to make sure that you have those contracts in place. Now, as service providers, you face a unique challenge because you most likely are your brand. You are the one providing the service. And so for a lot of your clients, it's going to be hard to separate you as a person from providing that service. And that's where that legal entity is going to come in handy. Ultimately, any type of lawsuit is going to go through a court system. And even though from the client's perspective, you are your business, from a legal perspective, you're going to walk in with an operating agreement. You're going to walk in with filed articles. You're most likely going to walk in with a separate bank statements, bookkeeping, and annual meeting minutes to show that you have very clearly been operating as that separate legal entity. So contract disputes, data and privacy is a big one, especially for Rhonda, like you, a virtual assistant who has access to probably some fairly confidential information for clients. And then if any of you have any kind of professional certifications, we have a lot of people who are registered nurses who then go out and instead of working for for a single employer as a W-2 will be 1099. And so you need to make sure that you're keeping your kind of education up to standards and up to date. Now, how are we setting this up? We want to create that LLC. We want to open that separate bank account. With the expansion of online banking, that's become much easier over the years. I remember having to make an appointment, bring everything into the banker's office, sit with them, hand over each piece of paper bit by bit. If you forgot to bring something, oh no, you had to reschedule that meeting. We have a couple of banking partners that we use that are online banks that with a click of a button, you can have a bank account set up before the end of the day. I did that. We have one for people who just need a normal business bank account that can accept payments, pay out vendors. And then we have another partner who is specifically for real estate investors. And on the real estate investing side, I opened two bank accounts. One of them, I was one click of a button through. We have what's called a platinum portal that you can log in, see all of the information for your entity, see its business address, see its EIN number, get access to the operating agreement, see a timeline for when taxes are due. And right next to it was a little button, open your account. I clicked it, filled in a couple of bits of information. And by the end of the day, I had an email saying your account's ready to fund. The second one, I needed one more form. And I got it to them the next day, and that bank account was open by the end of the day. So setting that up is not only vitally important, but it's also getting easier and easier. Gotcha. Rhonda's in Canada. If you do have a sole proprietor, you can have a separate bank account and you can have a separate EIN for but unfortunately, I'm not licensed to practice law in Canada, so you would most likely need to talk to somebody there. Once you've got everything set up, if you do any written contracts, if you hold patents, if you even just terms and conditions when people hire you, that fine print, you want to have that all a way to have everything signed and saved. And then you want to maintain clean records. So setting up that QuickBooks account or any other online sort of record keeping scenario works. Additionally, LLCs, you don't necessarily have to have an annual meeting. That's why they're so popular. Often people will gravitate toward the LLC rather than a true Inc. or a corp because corporations have shareholders. And that means you need to have an annual shareholder meeting. And corporations have a board of directors, which means you have to have an annual board of director meeting. They appoint officers as well. Now, when you are your business, you're all three of those positions, right? You're the shareholder, you're the officer, you're the director. And so you're sitting there having a meeting with yourself, which I'm sure if you guys are like me and you maybe talk to yourself while you're driving or while you're in the shower, those things are technically business meetings. And so when you're having a business meeting over a very large decision, maybe you're expanding to a new market, or maybe you're deciding to hire a particular vendor, it's a really great idea in an LLC. Even though you don't have to have an annual meeting, it's a great idea to have a couple of meetings a year at least, major decisions, or just a quarterly meeting. The meeting can be merely no new business, nothing new to report, but walking into a courtroom with 10 years of annual meeting minutes is going to feel a lot more protection and be a lot more protection than coming in with a flimsy 5-page operating agreement and just say, I swear I've been acting like a business this whole time. We had a client who did just that. We have a program called our company assistance program. So it makes it very easy to document those meetings. You just have to have your shower, and when you're done and you've dried off, you call us and say, hey, I've had a meeting, or you log into your portal and you fill in a couple of fields and we'll generate these meeting minutes for you. We'll send them to you via DocuSign. They automatically save in your Box folder, your cloud storage system, and you never have to even really look at them and hopefully would never need them. We had a client who did this consistently every quarter for over a decade, and she eventually did get sued. In a lot of situations, it's not if, it's when. You're out there long enough, it's going to happen. And they had gotten to the point where the judgment creditor was petitioning the court to pierce the corporate veil. They were trying to make the argument that this client had not really been running her business as separate and distinct from her. And so she was able to bring in a decade's worth of documentation. And they had a whiteboard, one of those projector screens, and they put up her operating agreement, and it was 50 pages, and they went through it line by line. They put up every single set of meeting minutes and went through it line by line, looking for any small thing that she may have done that would allow that judgment creditor to pierce through the corporate veil. And at the end of the day, her LLC maintained the protection that she wanted it to have, and she didn't have any other personal liability that attached to that lawsuit that was in the LLC. And so maintaining those corporate formalities is going to be a big one. Sarah's asking, she just started doing contracts in 2026. I didn't have all this knowledge prior, so this is all helpful. That's perfect.
Before we continue, a brief word from our sponsor. This educational workshop is sponsored by Anderson Advisors. If you've been listening and realizing there are gaps in how your business is currently set up, this is exactly where their team steps in. Anderson Advisors works with business owners, investors, and entrepreneurs to handle the legal and tax side of growth, structuring entities properly, reducing unnecessary tax exposure, and putting the right protections in place before issues arise. This is not general advice or one-size-fits-all templates. Their approach is strategic and tailored to your specific situation, whether you're just getting started or already generating consistent revenue. If you want support beyond this workshop, guidance that looks at your full financial picture and helps you make informed decisions, Anderson Advisors offers that level of expertise. You can explore their services and see how they can support your business using the link provided alongside this training. Now let's get back into the workshop.
Perfect. Especially on the contract side, we have what's called a platinum membership. That gives you essentially unlimited access to our attorney team. It's $75 a month. If you come to one of our live events, you get the initial cost. Usually it gets included. Shh, don't tell anyone. As part of the package. And for 75 bucks a month, you can call into our attorney team. You can chat with them. You can submit questions. You can submit your contracts that you're doing and have an attorney look over it. If you have something specific that you are worried about, they can find that clause. They can let you know if it's going to be a red flag. If you just want a general overview, we can do that as well. Or you can come into what we call our knowledge room. It's a Zoom just like this. You can pop in. We have scheduled office hours. So we have, I run our property transfer department. So I host a trust and deed hour 3 times a week. We have a landlord tenant expert. We have a nonprofit expert. We have a estate planning office hour. And so you can come in and you can ask any question you like. So you can give us a scenario. You can give us a tax question. We have tax professionals, attorneys in there as well. And it's for 75 bucks a month, which is incredible. I mean, one of the reasons I ended up going into law is some of the kind of things that I had seen my own family do and spend on attorneys. My husband being a broadcaster, had quite a big mouth and was constantly getting himself in trouble. And so we've kind of broke even in terms of my law school education costs versus not having to pay attorneys. So 75 bucks a month is incredibly democratic, and it gives you, we talk to some people of our 35 attorneys. Every single person knows who Mrs. G is because she comes in constantly. And so we have what we call our frequent flyers. You can come in as often as you like to get your questions answered. A lot of times it's really just having a third party to kind of bounce your issue off and from a legal lens, be able to kind of walk you through, okay, well, is this an issue? What can I do to mitigate this potential issue? What sort of documentation do I need to be keeping track of in anticipation of something bad happening? We very much like to be on what we call the preventative medicine side of things, meaning getting you set up so that you aren't in that situation, rather than the attorneys who come in on the backside. We have a little saying that once you're in trouble with an attorney, you'll pay double. And that very much is the case when you reach out to someone and they're having to clean up something after the fact. All right. So we do really want you to form your LLC, separate those finances, write every contract, get everything that you're doing in writing, and then observe those corporate formalities. And that's really a term of art, the corporate formalities. If you don't have a corporate formation, your corporate formalities are those annual meeting minutes, and your separate bookkeeping and documentation. And on the tax side, that really does help you, because when you go to report your taxes, you're going to have to report the income that you're generating on your business as separate and distinct from whatever you're doing, either in your W-2 job, if you haven't grown to the time where you can separate that out, or your personal expenses there. Mita, yes, we do. We're kind of love to be a one-stop shop. So we do the entity setup. We take into the tax considerations. We can do tax prep and planning. We have clients who our CPAs meet with and our tax attorneys meet with on a monthly or a quarterly or just an annual basis to plan. Maybe your company has taken off in the last year and suddenly the tax strategy, you didn't have any tax strategies before because you didn't need them. You were kind of spending what you brought in. But when you make that jump, a lot of times it happens suddenly, and then you're so busy you don't realize until the end of the year, until your CPA hands you that tax return and it has a giant number that you owe on the bottom. So we want to plan for that type of thing. Maybe it's a scenario where we can use something like the new 100% bonus depreciation rules, and you can buy some equipment or a vehicle and fully depreciate that because your company is going to be having a higher than normal income there. So yeah, we do all of those. The monthly platinum attorney membership is separate. We can create packages for you. We can kind of do things a la carte, but we do everything from A to B. We do the business setup. We can do the tax prep and the planning. We help you along in terms of observing those corporate formalities. And on the personal side, we like to tie it all together with your living trust there. All right. Yeah, so if you are staying as a sole proprietor, your personal assets could be at risk. And so this is very uncomfortable if you have, for example, own your primary residence, or you're sort of saving up to buy that primary residence. Those are considered nice, fat, juicy assets for somebody to potentially take, or that litigious attorney to take for their client. And so you want to keep those separate and distinct from your business. And like I said, if as your business grows, you can even have more than one business entity to even further separate out the assets of your business. For example, I believe it was Natasha with a skincare line. Perhaps you have one entity that holds the patent, uh, that owns the actual products, and then you're licensing that patent to your main company, who's then selling it and has that direct interaction with the client. And so when the ultimate end buyer sues someone, they're hitting that intermediary business entity. Worst case scenario, that business could declare bankruptcy, shut down, but you still own the patent and hold the patent over here in your other hand, and they can't pierce through that corporate veil. We have many clients who keep their cash reserves, $500,000, $1 million in a separate business bank account, and then they file a UCC1 and they loan it back to their original company so that their original company has the ability to use those funds. But if that original company that's providing the service is sued, there's no assets within that company itself. And again, worst case scenario, you can shut that company down. You still have your nest egg, your cash, and you can use that to restart, even in the same industry. And so creating a structure, what we call an asset protection structures, very important. Building up that business credit. You can do that as a sole proprietor, but if you do, your personal income and your personal tax return is almost always going to be included or factored in. As a business, you can get your own DUNS number. You can start building business credit. And then again, we're looking at worst case scenarios here. And I know as entrepreneurs, it's kind of hard because you have to look and plan with almost hope to because you are building something. But as an attorney, I'm just naturally inclined to think of the the worst possible situations. And in the situation where you have business credit and for some reason the market turns, social economic things happen in the world and your business can't pay that back, that is not gonna be on you. You would still have your own savings. You would still able to keep your own retirement, your own property. The business would be able to be shut down, reorganized, and then you would still have your life because you don't want to have to start over. So these are kind of the steps. They're very simplified. The operating agreement, I think a lot of people that do this on their own are not going to have an operating agreement. And unfortunately, that is the main document that's going to help you when you when or if you ever get into a lawsuit. We've all heard stories, or maybe you guys don't hear stories because you didn't go to law school, of how one word in a contract or one comma out of place changed the entire meaning. Especially if you're working with partners. The operating agreement is your rule book, it's your playbook, and you have the opportunity to create your own rules, which is great. We can do pro rata distributions, we can do non-pro rata distributions. But if we don't follow our own rules, the courts look very unfavorably on it. Maybe you're in a state that doesn't provide a ton of liability protection. Like California. California has a limited liability statute like most states, but because California courts tend to be what on the legal side are considered more liberal, courts have eroded those protections over time. So that essentially in many states, a single member LLC is virtually the same as a sole proprietorship. What we can do is then use dual entity structures to pull in the more favorable laws of other states, states like Nevada, states like Wyoming, so that you can pull in the beneficial laws that you don't have with your home state. So in a lot of our structures, we're using what we call a Wyoming holding company. Wyoming has what's known as charging order protection. What that means is that even if there is a lawsuit against you personally, because we're looking at liability from both directions. We want to protect you from your business, but we also want to protect your business from you. So if you are out in your little death machine that we call cars that we're all somehow allowed to drive every day. My 17-year-old just had his second driving lesson yesterday, and I can't believe we let people whose brains are not fully formed drive these death machines around. But there's it's a huge source of liability. And so you don't want your personal creditor to be able to reach into your business and get at those assets. With charging order protection, all they can do is essentially put a lien on it. So your business can continue to operate, can continue to grow within its own environment, separate from that lawsuit that has attached to you personally. And so where you set up having an operating agreement, we have a checklist of 10 things that if you come to us with an existing operating agreement, you can upload it for contract review, document review, and our attorneys will go through that checklist and say you're missing X, Y, and Z, or this is good. I'll be honest, I've probably only seen or reviewed one operating agreement that a client has brought to us that was either they created on their own or had uh, like an online company create for them. I've only seen maybe one that is even close to mildly being worth the paper that it was written on. So having that operating agreement is very important. Yeah, Sarah, errors and omissions insurance is great. And keep in mind that proper entity setup and having protection as a business owner is not a full replacement for insurance. In many industries, you have to get a certain type of insurance. Like I was a notary in California for many years, which doesn't seem like a very high liability activity, but the state required you have at least $10,000 of errors and omissions insurance. So knowing that rule is important. And even so, we still hold all of our normal insurance, car insurance, home insurance, landlord insurance, umbrella policy. Having proper business setup is not a one solution replacement for insurance. They work together as part of pieces of the puzzle. Ultimately, if we get in a lawsuit, we want that judgment creditor to go for our insurance. We want them to see our structure. We want them to see our business. We want them to see that we've run our business so well that they know they can't pierce the corporate veil. And so they're simply going for that insurance policy and willing to settle, oftentimes for much less than the original lawsuit was for. I'll tell you a story. We had a client, his name was Alan, and he ran a series of nightclubs in California. And that's a high risk activity. And what you can imagine eventually happened. He had two clients or patrons that had left the bar at the end of the night and were walking down the road. And unfortunately, another patron who had been drinking at the establishment got behind the wheel and hit these two young people and pinned them up against the wall of the building. Serious injuries, obviously, huge lawsuit. And as the nightclub owner, Alan's business got pulled into it. And it was California, so the liability lawsuit went pretty quickly, assigned liability to the nightclub, but they were trying to go after Alan himself because he had several other establishments, which fortunately we had put in separate business entities, right? At that point, they're asking him all of the questions about what he owns, how his business set up. And at that point, he's telling them everything. And the attorneys at the deposition asked for a recess. They said, turn off the camera. We need to talk outside. And they actually had looked up who we were and saw that Anderson, what we do for clients. We have extensive online presence, a lot of free education out there for people. And they knew that they weren't going to be able to pierce through his corporate veil. And so what had started out as a $5 million lawsuit ended up being settled for his insurance premium, his insurance maximum, which was a $250,000 liability policy, which was not, no one wants to pay 250, but I'd gladly pay 250 instead of 5 million. 5 million would have wiped out everything he had built over the years. The property owner, the nightclub building owner, was his dad. His name was Yoshi, and he, like my grandfather, had been in the was Japanese American, had been in the United States during World War II, and didn't have a great experience. My grandfather actually graduated from Manzanar internment camp, and Yoshi just didn't really trust the system. And so he had never set up a structure to kind of protect his real estate and business interests. And they sued him as well because the wall was there. Somehow, by simply owning the building that these kids got hurt next to, made a difference. And he asked for the same deal. Well, Alan got this deal. I'd like the same deal my son got. And they wouldn't give it to him because he simply owned those buildings and those businesses as an individual without any LLC or protection. And he ended up paying full price for what was essentially, he had the least liability in the situation, right? And so how we set it up, running it the right way, is going to be important. So some questions that you can ask yourself now. Is your business, are you starting to hire employees? We definitely want to get you a legal entity if you are dealing with any kind of employees or contractors. How are you signing your contracts? As an individual, or in your capacity as the manager of your company or the president of your company. Simply, as much as just comma president, comma manager, that makes a big difference in the legal world. And then here we go. What you want to ask now, if you've got an LLC, you can quickly check to see if it's active at the Secretary of State's office. LLCs require annual filings. And so if you don't keep that up, and this can vary, in California, it's every 2 years. Most states, it's every year. If you don't keep that up, or if you've relied on maybe your CPA to do it, they can go into default and they can be administratively dissolved. My mentor in the television world, that happened to him. His CPA was supposed to be doing the annual filings for him along with his tax returns. And his CPA just got old and forgot, to the point where when he called him, he didn't even remember who he was and that he had promised to do this for him. So make sure that your LLC is active, it stays in good standing. You have that operating agreement. I can tell you now, if your operating agreement's less than 20 pages, it's not going to be very good. You just simply can't get the clauses and the terms into something that's that short. So we've got some people who will ask, well, I will just get ChatGPT to write my operating agreement. And it's funny because when I first started getting that question, I was like, okay, well, why don't we just ask ChatGPT? Hey, and I asked ChatGPT, hey, I'm a business owner. Why should I not have you write my operating agreement? Or is it a good idea? Are you capable of writing an operating agreement for me? And ChatGPT did not think that ChatGPT should write an operating agreement for a business owner. It was a sort of fun little exercise to do. That at this point, AI is not a replacement for real legal knowledge. There are so many cases where you see attorneys being scolded or, to the extent, disbarred because they have used AI to write court briefs that cite cases and case law that simply don't exist right now. And so these types of resources aren't a substitution for true legal expertise. And ours has been developed over, I mean, Anderson was started in 1999. Uh, a lot of what we do is based on real life mistakes that either our founders did or that our clients have seen. We haven't had the same strategies or done the same things throughout the years because the legal field, the tax field changes, business changes, and it's changing faster and faster every day. And so what works today may not work 5, 10 years down the road. The even more interesting thing with ChatGPT is that as AI gets more and more prevalent, those prompts, the questions you ask AI are becoming discoverable in court. So if you ask a question that implicates intent to defraud or do something less than kosher, that will be could potentially be pulled into court. And there's no attorney-client privilege with AI. All right, so we don't want to mix our finances. We don't want to not have an operating agreement. We want to have that agreement with ourselves. We want to have our playbook, and we want to file, and we want to operate under it. As soon as you make that switch from a sole proprietor to running your business effectively the correct way through a legal entity, you cut off any liability, right? So everything you are doing now as an individual will attach to yourself individually. The statute of limitations on a number of things can be anywhere from 2 years to 5 years to 10 years, depending on what it is. And so the sooner, the better, so that you're protected moving forward. All right, so if you guys have any questions, please unmute, or you can put them up into the chat. This was 50 minutes. I pontificated. We do a free strategy session, so you can sit with one of our senior strategists. They can talk about what you are doing, what your plans are, what other potential assets you have, whether that's real estate, bank accounts, stock accounts, retirement accounts that you need protected and separated out. That's a 45-minute session we can do for free. I can actually put these 2 links here. Let me take this link. This is for the strategy session. I'll put it into the chat. And then we also have a number of events. What we just talked about for almost an hour, we do an all-day Saturday webinar. The first half is asset protection and business, and the second half is tax and estate planning. And so we often have people who will come multiple times because when COVID was going on, it wasn't hard to sit through a all-day Saturday webinar because we were all sitting around staring at each other anyway. But these days we're allowed outside of the house and we're moving and shaking. So you can come multiple times. You could come in the morning one day. The next Saturday, you could come in the afternoon. And then if you just cannot get enough, we do a 3-day live event. We're actually doing one next weekend in Las Vegas. We hold one every quarter. I think the quarter Q2 is in Houston. Q3 may be in Florida. These are all business expenses if you want to take a trip out here. We have a lot of clients who use it as an excuse to come to Vegas, use us as an excuse to come on a business trip. So that second link there is to get a schedule for our live events. You guys got any questions?
As we wrap up, here's what matters most. You now understand why setting up your business correctly is not optional. It's the difference between being protected and being exposed. The next step is simple. Take what you've learned today and apply it to your specific situation with the right guidance. That's where Anderson Advisors comes in. Their team will walk through your current setup, identify any gaps, and show you exactly what needs to be in place based on where you are and where you're going. This is a real conversation about your business, your income, and your long-term protection. If you have a US-based business and you're earning, planning to earn, or building something you want to keep, this is not a step to delay. Go ahead and book your call using the link provided. Choose a time that works for you and come prepared with your questions. Make sure your business is structured to support the level you're stepping into. I'll see you on the inside.